Okay, good morning, everybody. Good morning. I'd like to start by welcoming everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dean Demizio. I'm president of the Greater Fort Erie Chamber of Commerce. Before we start our presentations on the state of Fort Erie, I'd like to say some very important thank yous to begin. On behalf of the staff and the board of the Chamber of Commerce, I'd like to thank everyone attending this important event, especially Mayor Doug Martin and Jim Thibert from the EDTC. Thank you very much. Also, I'd like to thank Bridgewater. How was breakfast? As always, thank you, Rob. This morning will be taped by Trent Matthews of Answers Computer Services, who is videotaping the event for an upload to the Chamber's website and for YouTube. And a big thank you to Meridian Credit Union, who's the sponsor for this event. So thank you to Meridian. Denise, I know you're somewhere. You see me moving this mic, I know this mic very well, and it's going to squeal. So. I'd like to acknowledge the board of directors that are here, and again, I want to note they are all volunteers. Scott Caldwell, Neil Thornton, Denise Faraday, Marina Butler, Rebecca Nye, Jerry Brisson, Courtney Benito, and Stephen Passero. And I don't think I missed anyone, did I? Thank you for your attendance. They are directors from our board. As normal, when I'm up here, I have to do the quick chamber event calendar for you. So, quick housekeeping, check the table at the back for flyers, and I'll let you know what's coming up for the Chamber of Commerce. On Saturday, February 9th, there's a dinner and improv show, 7 to 9 p.m. at the Ridgeway Legion to benefit the Chamber's bursary as well as the Legion Veterans Fund. Tickets are available through the Chamber or Answers Computer Services. Wednesday, February 13th, the Magic of Collaboration Team Building Workshop presented by Anthony Linden. It's going to be a super event. If you haven't registered yet, there's still available room, $35 and up for tickets. It's a great workshop. If you're an employer, if you can't make it, send your employees. I think they'll benefit greatly from it. Tuesday, February 19th, our VA5 is going to be at 231 Garrison Road with our co-hosts Nino Dambra and CNP. And finally, Friday, March 8th, International Women's Day, networking luncheon from 11:30 to 2. And our guest speaker is going to be syndicated cartoonist Sandra Bell Lundy from Between Friends. So that's going to be a good one. So get your tickets early. And one last word, bursary applications are now available on our website. And there's some back there, but if you have students, whether they're your children, grandchildren, whoever, that want to apply for the bursary, the applications are coming out. So now, to the meat of the potatoes. Thanks, everyone. What a great attendance. I appreciate everybody taking time out, because I know a lot of you are busy. So what we want to do this morning is, I just want to say a few words on behalf of the Chamber, give you an overview of what we do. Next will be up Mayor Doug Martin, and then he'll bring up Jim Thibert from the EDTC. What I ask is that you hold questions till the end. The presentations will be brief and to the point, allowing some question time after. So let me start with the Greater Fort Erie Chamber of Commerce, who we are. Volunteer organization, 14 directors on our board. 10 of them directors, 4 are executive directors. And again, they're volunteers, giving a lot of time to the business community. And of course, our staff. You saw them when you walked in. Karen Audette, our operations manager, and Kate Marceau's administrative assistant, filling in for Ricky O'Kane, who's on maternity leave. Thank you. What does the Greater Fort Erie Chamber of Commerce do? We're the voice of business, and we really are the voice of business. We try to act as a catalyst for all businesses in the community, regardless of what size. We try to build partnerships through all the community of Greater Fort Erie, Stevensville, Ridgeway, Crystal Beach, and Fort Erie itself. We represent over 400 businesses, small, medium, large, of all sizes in this area. And I just want to say that's a great accomplishment for a small town like this to have such a large membership, so I thank everybody. What do we do? Actually, there was a reporter saying, Dean, what does the Chamber do? Well, we do a lot. Training and education, lunch and learns. We put on several lunch and learns throughout the year, which gives an opportunity for a small business, an employee, whoever, to come out and maybe learn a certain new skill. We do those throughout the year. We usually have volunteers from businesses. We try to keep it local to come out and just share some information. What we started this year, actually the end of last year, was our breakfast speaker series. If you haven't been to one, you need to come out. The last one was at Rich Products. What we do is we want to get local businesses sharing their success stories with other businesses. What a success that was. It's something new that we're trying, and we're very pleased with it. And also the team building workshop that's going to happen on February 13th. Again, leadership. The Chamber, and I've said this in the past, if you came to join the Chamber for a social aspect of it, that's great, but we're here to do more. We're here to help business. We're here to help you grow. We're here to educate in business however we can. The team building workshop is going to be an excellent event if you can make it. Other events that we do, International Women's Day on March 8th. A lot of work goes into these events, and it always sells out. International Women's Day is recognized across the board everywhere. Some of our key events, the annual gala auction. If you haven't been to it, you need to come out. Why do we do that? For bursaries. Why do we do bursaries? Because we want to promote our local students in post-secondary education. Our gala auction last year was probably the most successful we ever had. And that money, a lot of that money is going to be steered towards students. And while I'm speaking of students, we took the initiative to invite the MIAC. And if you're not familiar with MIAC, it's the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council. So how about a quick hand for these kids here? We direct some of our funds to kids like this. We want to make sure if they're going to post-secondary school that, you know, maybe we can give a $500 bursary. So the applications are out there. I'm telling you, it's a great program. And why did we invite MIAC? Well, the reason is because we feel as a chamber we need to nurture these young minds. Let's get them involved young. Let's get them excited about the town of Fort Erie. And I can tell you, it's kind of saddening because past President Facero and myself actually mimicked the same lines at our bursary award, saying, when you leave Fort Erie and go to school, please come back and work here. You know, I hear some chuckles, but it's actually sad. It's pretty sad. So personally, I'm hoping that one day a chamber president can sit up here, give out the bursary awards and say, hey, you know what? Half our recipients are coming back to Fort Erie at the end of post-graduation. So that's what my goal is. So let's get these young people, these young minds involved, because they're the future of Fort Erie, and that's something the Chamber's doing. So welcome MIAC, and like I said earlier to some of you, can see how the adults play in the sandbox today. Our Business After Fives. Our Business After Fives are a great opportunity for networking. You can meet some faces you never knew before. Give you a chance to go up and say, hey, I've seen you in town. This is what I do. Actually, I've exchanged a couple cards this morning. And that's what we're about, a large part of it, networking. What else do we do? The Mayor's Drive for Business Golf Tournament in June. We do that again. It's a great networking event, but again, that money goes back into, part of it goes into bursaries. Part of it goes into operations. We try to put as much as we can back into the town. And look forward to this. We're doing the Business Excellence Awards once again. If you recall, back in 2011 we did that. It was a sellout affair. We recognized the businesses, and I see Circle P Paving, who was a recipient there. Not to send anybody else out, but I see the Phibbs brothers right there, and they were a recipient. And some other businesses in here may have received awards too. That's what we want to do. We want to recognize businesses. We want to recognize the standouts in town. So that's going to be coming up this fall, and we'd like you to be involved. Something else that the Chamber's doing now that is very important is advocacy. We are making sure that we have built ties and relationships, not only at a municipal level, provincial, regional. We're out there. We're meeting, and you may not know it, but we will meet with cabinet ministers, deputy ministers, various people to sing the song of Fort Erie. We want to make sure our message is the same, and working in unison with the town of Fort Erie and EDTC, we want that message out there. Fort Erie's open for business. Fort Erie's open for business. We want your business down here. You know, as I look around, I see a lot of faces looking down like, you know what? You gotta buy into it. As a chamber, our businesses need it. As people in the community, we need it. Fort Erie is open for business. And as a chamber, we're going to do as much advocating as we can on your behalf to all levels of government. And as I said earlier, we want to plant the seeds of growth. We want to make relationships with the new government that just, the new premier that came in. We want to make sure that she knows Fort Erie's here. Come on down, see what we have. We have a lot to offer. We want to work closely with the town on their initiatives, with EDTC, bringing in the Speedway, marina developments, other developments. I know there's a lot of back and forth as to what we have, but you know what, unless you want to, you'll read my chamber blog in the next few days, but I'm going to quote from it. If you want Fort Erie to become a footnote in the history book, where the War of 1812 once was, it's going to happen unless we find a new path, a new direction. And as a chamber, that's where we want to take you. We want to get businesses up and running. So I appreciate your time. I'm going to ask you that you hold any questions for our panel at the end. And next I want to introduce His Honor, Mayor Doug Martin. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. I don't know if you just said it like that. Nope, that's not going to work either. Like that. No? Okay, I'll just set it down like this. Good morning, everyone. Nice to have you here, especially to the group from MIAC and Ben McDermott, who's done just a great job over the last number of years in putting the MIAC team together, and appreciate all of you being here as well. This is going to be in two parts this morning, the State of the Union address. I'll be giving some opening comments, and then I'll turn it over to Jim Thibert to provide you with basically the guidance and the comments that he gave to us as a council prior to the presentation of the EDTC budget as to where we are, where we're going, and how we're going to get there, and what are the challenges and what are the opportunities that are available for us. 6 years ago, when I was first elected mayor, my opening speech was talking about council being as a team. And I see Sandy Demizio is here as well. And at the time I said to him, the motto of the Argonauts, and we played with the Argonauts, was that their theme was pulling together as a team. And if we're not all pulling together in the same way, we're just going to keep going in circles. Well, I find the challenge of this council that I have this year is even more exacerbated by the fact that we're not only not pulling together, we got some pulling in one direction, other pulling in another direction, and some that just can't even seem to be able to locate the water. And it's very sad that we just have no direction on council at this time. I'd like to acknowledge that there are some councillors here. Councillor Schuler is here, Councillor Hill is here, Regional Councillor Teal is here, and I see that our MPP Kim Crater is here as well. Thank you for coming. Stephen. And Stephen Passero as well, sorry. I try to forget Steve as much as I possibly can. Oh, I'm sorry, Stephen. I think the challenges that we've had over the last 2 years are well documented. I think it started with great promise with what was carried over from the last term of council. And unfortunately, with the circumstances that happened over the last 2 years, it seemed to have stalled and actually probably regressed to the point now where we seem to have got down pretty low on ourselves and in the eyes of the rest of the community and in the region. But as you know, I had my knee replaced 2 weeks ago today, and sleeping at night isn't the easiest thing to do. So I'm laying there. I saw a movie called Summer Rental. It's with John Candy. Has anyone seen that? Where he was an air traffic controller who was sent south to try to regroup himself and find himself again. And the theme song for that was a song called Turning Around by Jimmy Buffett. So I'd just like to begin this and kind of use this as a theme for this morning. One of the lines was, been stuck down here for so long in zero, I'd just like to make it to one. And the chorus is, turning around, heroes and clowns, holding my ground, yes, we've been down, but we're turning around. I think that'll be the theme for the next 2 years of this council. It's time for us to get our act together and turn this thing around. The last 2 years we've been challenged on many fronts, internally and externally, and I think they're all well documented. Internally, it began with the rift that began right off the bat with the Bay Beach situation. With the protracted debate and the division on council, setting up sides in the division within our community, started off on a bad light and on a bad foot. Also, some of the decisions that have happened with our staff over the last number of years. We've lost some by their own decision, others not by their own decision. and that's unfortunate. But I'd like to thank Mr. Ron Tripp, who's here today as our CEO, for all the great work that he's done over the last year and a half. He's been doing the job. I think you all understand my comments that I think he should be given the job on a permanent basis. Externally, we've had some number of problems as well. A lot of it out of our control. The global economy is clearly a challenge for all of us businesses, specifically in a border town, with the Canadian dollar and the impact that it has on some of our businesses that are here and our competitiveness. Some businesses in town continue to grow and to succeed, and we applaud them for that in these tough economic times. And we don't hear much about them because they're clearly going on about doing their own business in these tough times and doing well. There are others who have struggled and indeed have failed over the last couple of years. And this is unfortunate, and it's been harder specifically on the small business owners. A lot of the business owners that are members of this Chamber of Commerce, because of challenges that are out there that were beyond their control and beyond their ability to compete. Some of the provincial policies that we've had to deal with that were challenging for us specifically, and they're well documented as well, with the wetland situation and the provincial policy as far as not being able to expand our urban boundaries. As we said to them, if we can't develop within our urban boundaries because of the wetland legislation, and you won't let us develop outside the urban boundary, where exactly are we supposed to develop? And the response was, that's not their problem, it's our problem. So we've been working diligently to try to rectify that. There's also been other decisions made by the province or through the OLG, specifically in the closure of the slots and the impact that that's had on our racetrack. And we will continue to fight for our racetrack. Although we say we've been stuck on zero, we're just trying to make it to one. There are some opportunities, and there is more than one that were out there for us that are available in the next coming years. The opportunities of the Speedway that has been well documented, and we're just anxious to get this going. If we can finally get this through the OMB and get this development started, the benefits to this community are going to be enormous and significant. This is going to be the catalyst to start bringing us around again, and I think we're all in favor and support of doing what we can to see this great project go forward. The Bay Beach project, now that it's finally been approved and hopefully will be getting soon, I think will act as a catalyst of regeneration in the Crystal Beach area. Our continued efforts by Jim Thibert and his group at the track to save the racetrack, and hopefully we can convince the province to give them the opportunity to have the track going for at least one more year and then on into the future as we move forward. The new hospital that is hopefully coming to South Niagara, that is going to be a great benefit to us, specifically with the new urgent care center that we have been committed to by Dr. Smith to be here in the town of Fort Erie. The support last week of the east-west corridor by the region. East-west corridor is going to be a new highway that is the precursor to the Mid-Peninsula corridor we've been fighting with for probably the last, I don't know, John, 12, 15 years. Or even more, 20? 20 years. Yeah, and we're finally to the point now where yesterday at Public Works that was the preferred route to take what's called the east-west corridor from Fort Erie, from the Queenie down Netherby Road, to tag up to the 140 and onto the 406 and out to the other side of St. Catharines. That has now been approved as the prime area for development. And that is the first step to getting the new Mid-Peninsula corridor, which will take us all the way up past the Monroe Airport and hooking with the link and on further to London and Kitchener. Now, this is a great opportunity for the Grow South opportunities along this new major corridor for Fort Erie and Southern Niagara. There's been positive changes with our development charges that were reduced both at the town level and at the regional level as well. We have engaged on a new promotional video for the town of Fort Erie. I think we saw at council last week that we're on a show called Today in America, which is hosted by Terry Bradshaw, that highlights the activities of the town of Fort Erie as a place to come and invest for U.S. investors that want to come and invest in Canada here in Fort Erie. I'd like to thank all of the partners that we use, specifically Riches, David Thompson, that promoted who we are in the town of Fort Erie and how we want to go further. Bureaucracy as well was part of that, and Fleet. Also on the positive side, that our staff is fully committed to this town and to moving forward as well, and to get any developments that we can that come forward, in place and on time as quickly as possible. Last Monday night, we did pass the budget with a 1.12% increase all in. So that has been accomplished. And also there's new opportunities coming with the change in leadership at the provincial level. We have a new premier, and we'll be soon having a new government. As the new premier puts her cabinet together, I'm not sure, Kim, that she decided on a new cabinet yet, or that hasn't happened yet?
It's happening right now.
So that will be coming soon. And with her help from our MPP, Mr. Crater, we will be at Queen's Park working with the new premier. I've met her on several occasions through our work at Niagara and through the assistance of Kim at the town. I can tell you that she understands the plight of the town of Fort Erie. As the Minister of Transportation, she was fully in support and aware of the new speedway and the contributions that were necessary to bring this forward by the province. And as the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, I was with her on several occasions to bring forward our concerns as they come forward with the legislation, specifically with the wetlands and the expansion of urban boundaries. So I believe that she has a good ear to what's happening here in the town of Fort Erie, and we will look to her as being an ally. But we must be prepared and in position to take advantage of the changes that are coming. Obviously, with the change in leadership, it's only inevitable that there will be elections sometime coming up soon. And we have to have our ducks in order to be able and available to take advantage of the new directions, specifically during election year as the promises come forward. But in order to do this, our strategic plan clearly indicated our number one goal as this council was economic development and jobs. And it's impossible for us to succeed without a full support and full commitment from this council to our Economic Development Corporation. I was disappointed last week as we went through our budget that the request from our EDTC to top up our reserves for assistance to local businesses that was depleted 3 years ago now was once again turned down. I was disappointed to have one of the councillors say that it was put in just as a joke. That evening, it was clearly not a joke, it's dead serious. These are the dollars that we use to help businesses and industry within the town of Fort Erie in times of trouble. It was used in the past to assist fleet, to assist paramedics, and will be there as we move forward as well. I was also disappointed when this is our Economic Development Corporation. And I'll be blunt, I was very disappointed that our own representative on town council didn't support that as well. We need the full support of this council for our economic development. It can't be just the lip service. It can't just be, yeah, I agree with you here, but I vote against it there. It's got to be their full commitment for us to succeed. It's time for us to put aside our petty politics and personal vendettas and get on with the business of running this town. And this is where we need you. You're our Chamber of Commerce. You're the voice of business in the town of Fort Erie. We need you to be vocal, we need you to be positive, and we need to hear your input. Democracy is not a spectator sport. We need your advice. We need your commitment. We need you to tell members of council when they're doing things right, and specifically when they're doing things wrong. I've been very pleased with the support that we've received over the last number of weeks after the presentation from the EDTC to the town council, which you'll hear today. Most of you find that this has been a very positive sign to move forward. The brouhaha that's happening in the press is unfortunate. It does none of us any good, and we have to put those, I guess, differences of the past in the past. And we're pretty lucky here in the town of Fort Erie that we have an economic development department that is as skilled as it is. It's most unusual at the municipal level to have this type of expertise available to us. The skills and education, coupled with the relationships that they have with their peers around the region and at senior levels of government as well. And it is key to us as a council to hear what they have to say and take their skills and their foresight and insight as to how we can help ourselves to move forward. I'm certain you'll enjoy the presentation from Mr. Thibert today, which is the same one we had at council. And I'm sure you'll learn from his findings and recommendations. I can assure you that Jim will be unchained and uncensored, as he always is, and always enjoyable, which he was. And I hope that you learn, from what is coming with this presentation. Don't believe a lot of the rumors and the innuendo that you read out there, promising people. His presentation is specific, to the point, and positive as to how we have to go, where we're going and how we have to get there. But we need you, again, as our business voice, to be there, to help us work together, to be in the boat, pulling together in the same direction. You know, as I said, if we're either going to pull together on this and pull together in the same direction, and if you're not willing to do that, then maybe it's time to get out of the boat. We have to move forward. This has been this is our town. We're the ones that built this town. We're the ones that will continue to build this town, to make this town prosper. We need your positive input to achieve those attainable goals that we're hoping for. And we need you to help us to turn it around. Thank you. And now I'd like to bring up the chairman of the general manager of the EDTC, Mr. Jim Thibert.
Good morning, and thank you all for coming out. This to me is a personal milestone. And the reason for that is that we've been working with the Chamber of Commerce for well over 20 years, and I've been involved with the Chambers of Commerce in our office, sharing space, having gone through 4 general managers and 3 presidents, and I've always tried to get them to deal with issues in Fort Erie. And they do a great job. But there's always a reluctance expressed to deal with issues because they're very concerned about the public not agreeing with them and then having retribution on their business. And as the mayor says, democracy is not a spectator sport. So to have the Chamber of Commerce have the fortitude to invite me to a breakfast, unchained, untethered, Jimmy Thibert raw. I want to talk about your staff and your board of directors and your president really wanting to help Fort Erie. So let's start off with some profanity. Everybody has some milestones in their life. And pardon me for the MIAC team here if you don't know what I'm going to talk about next, but you should look it up because it's very interesting. But as any 12-year-old would, and this is, believe it or not, before computers and TV, damn it. A couple things influenced me. The first every day was reading Little Abner. And of course, a 12-year-old doesn't read Little Abner in the newspaper as a cartoon for Granny or Abner. We're looking at Miss Daisy, okay? But the other thing that struck me as a 12-year-old was Pogo. And the one that struck me the most and has lived with me every day was Pogo looking in the mirror. And the caption was, I looked to see my enemies and I saw myself. Okay? And this is the message that we've been trying to get out to people in Fort Erie and trying to get the council. Look in the mirror and see who your enemy is. Okay? All the negative talk, all the negative repercussions. Now it's obvious, it's very obvious, that there are people hurting, that things have changed. But what we tried to do on Tuesday night is to explain to council the context for what's happening in Fort Erie, both regionally, nationally, internationally. And we asked them to do 2 things. The first is, tell the truth, tell the facts. Okay, when constituents come to you as a council, and they ask you questions, they respect you, and they would like and deserve the truth, and they deserve the facts. And the second thing is, and something that I've talked to our senior management team, I've espoused in public before, ask the next question. Customer service in Fort Erie has gone way up. We dealt with this with Harry Schlang as the past CAO. We dealt with it with the senior management team, which is, when somebody comes to the table, when somebody comes to the counter, don't try to respond to what it is they're asking unless it's very obvious. Ask the next question, because then you have it in context. And if you ask the question after that, you're really helping. I'm surprised that all the newspapers didn't pick up that I was anti-donut store, because I talked at the council about how councillors tend to seem to be briefed by staff and briefed by people And when they come out of a donut store, they've done an entirely different view. So that's my prologue, and I want to tell you, I'm going to try to keep this presentation exactly like it was on the Tuesday night at council last week. I am wearing the same jacket, the same shoes, the same socks, the same shirt, the same tie, different underwear. Okay? We're going to try to keep this as close as possible. So let's talk about the EDC for a minute. Just what it is, how it got here, and what it's supposed to do. Well, we're supposed to be the conduit between council and their policies and business, an advocate for business in this community that doesn't compete against the mandate of the Chamber of Commerce. We do different things. We have different skill sets. We complement each other. But this was set up long before I got here. Previous mayors, previous councils determined that they wanted an independent corporation. They set up the structure, they set up the mandate, they set up the board. And they did that so it couldn't be willy-nilly attacked when councils change. In those days, councils changed every 2 years, and then it was every 3 years, and now it's every 4. But the problem being, you need a conduit with business. Businesses are here for 50 or 100 years if we're successful. And they can't have policies or advocacy changing just because of the flavor of the day or a different councilor shows up. They pay huge taxes, they employ a great many people, and of course that's all what we want, successful businesses. So what we brought to the table over the last 10 years, when we restructured the board to make it smaller, faster, and more responsive to business and council, is we provide them with a document like this every year, which is our budget, our performance goals and objectives, what we did, every commitment that we made last year of budget and how well we did. And it also has a state of the economy, which is pretty unique in all of Niagara, if not beyond. And so when we look back over the years from 2003, you can see the theme. The first was growth and growing pains because of the change. Building on momentum, which is our intermediate strategy. What do we do to use your tax dollars efficiently in the short term? In 2005, planning today for tomorrow's prosperity. A longer-term solution, a longer-term strategy. Building on relationships that produce results in 2006 and beyond. We were on top of the heap. 2006 was the year where everybody was starting to recognize Fort Erie as the place to be, the place to develop. On track, on target in 2007. 2008, it takes money to make money. We were talking about changes in council and things getting a little tight because of the gaming money. And we had to tell them, look, you can economize, you can do a lot of things, but don't forget, you're supposed to be using the dollars wisely and efficiently and effectively. Anybody can spend $30 million. The question is it spent well, and can you get $40 million worth of benefit? That's how business deals. 2010, under assault. 2011, trying to maintain our legacy of growth. 2012, developers pay for development. Probably the biggest fallacy going is that you can charge business taxes, and then when they want to expand, charge them more money and horrendous development charges and a whole lot of fees for the privilege of expanding in your town, paying more taxes for the next 50 years and hiring your neighbors. This is absurd. Okay? The real goal here is to get your councils to spend within their means and also to be able to manage expectations of the public. And it takes a lot of fortitude and a lot of understanding by councils to do that. And now what we're talking about in 2013 is where has our competitive advantage gone. But I want you to understand, these are forward-looking documents. We give these to the council ahead of time. We don't come back at the end of the year and say, this is what happened. We're trying to predict, we're trying to provide advice to council. And that's what we do. We use our skills, we use our experience, we use our connections, and we provide advice to council. And if we don't provide good advice, we got a problem. If we didn't give you the best advice we could possibly muster, we would be like an apple farmer, an apple orchard farmer. If we didn't have any apples, are you still a farmer? Are you still an apple farmer? And so we're very sensitive about how we portray the information, the accuracy of the information, and we put an awful lot of work into it. So because that local state of the economy is something that we've provided for years, it's become expected, but we're not certain how many people really pay attention to it. And this year, because of the controversy, if it's done anything, it's really opened the doors to a lot of people to see what we do and what advice we give and the context in which you live from an economic perspective. Now this is a graph that's not to scale, but it demonstrates what our messages are about Fort Erie. And we were growing, and we were telling people we were growing at the rate of 1% a year. It's about all you can handle with the staff and with the budget and the land available. We were going up. Now, everything took a hit in about 2008, and it really had nothing to do with Fort Erie. It has to do with world economics. The bottom blew out of the American market because of their failure to deal and address properly on Wall Street with mortgages. And as a result, capital closed up, banks were, Lehman Brothers, big banks, big financial institutions were collapsing, and it caused a lot of problems. I can tell you right here, right now, how immediate the impact was on Fort Erie. We got major corporations that had long-term contracts that were pulled back because their American customers didn't have access to capital to go ahead and buy it. It's the principal reason DMI is not here today. They sold to the United States, their customers couldn't get the capital to build projects. And they don't build one wind tower, they build 40, 60, 100 at a time. And they couldn't get that kind of money out of the banks. And today they still can't get it. And they're not the only ones. So if you're looking at the view from what we call 25,000 feet, you can see the trends. In the industrial sector, we've talked about the industrial sector diversifying in 2010, stabilizing but at some risk is what we predicted in 2011, and stable but with some risk in 2012. The tourism sector, it's taken a beating since the year 2000. And one thing we've been able to tell people is if you're in the tourism business today, you are one tough, efficient cookie. It's as simple as that. The gaming industry, declining, gone. The only thing that we may be able to hold back and build on is bingos, and we're certainly killing ourselves every day trying to keep that track open. And I want to give thanks to Kim Crater for that, because there's days when even I get down and he encourages me. That is 24/7 operation. And we got tremendous staff over there. We got tremendous people working very hard to keep that up and around. And all our horsemen want to come back, but we need fair play from the government here. The retail commercial sector, very difficult in Fort Erie for one reason. Absolutely zero customer loyalty, zero brand loyalty. There are places out there that have made their niches though, and you really have to look at that. And we'll talk about it in a minute, called the value proposition. I'm going to pick one. Nice chocolate. Everybody knows about nice chocolate. Okay? There's a reason for that. But a lot of other things have taken a beating in the commercial sector because Fort Erie has been in a position that you all enjoyed. There was no challenges when you were growing up to going across the border. You're next to a city of 1 million people that was prosperous. It had all the variety, all the prices. It was doing great. And we'll talk about those and the fallacy of that shortly. But it's the reason why you don't have clothing stores here for women. I can't buy a suit in Fort Erie, you can't get a decent pair of shoes unless they're runners. Because there's no business. Everybody takes it away. They go someplace else. The residential housing sector, we'll talk in a minute, but it's been fairly stable. And so where do we get this information from every year? Well, every year in September, we start with a formal process that we started 11 years ago. And that is with our industrial leaders forums. And there are 17 or 18 of the major industrial firms in Fort Erie that every year come. And we've built a tremendous relationship with them. They have no hesitancy calling me on a Christmas Eve when somebody can't get across the border to work on their downtime. And in exchange for those types of services, they are kind enough to let us know and fill us in when there might be problems or issues or where we can help. Because we stay on top of it and we advise council of these things. Those 16 represent by far the vast majority of jobs in this town. And what they'll tell you is, many of them are doing very well. Very well, and you should be proud of that. But they quietly go about doing their business, and they try to stay out of the hubbub, because most of them are international in scope and can't afford that. Second thing is, we've been bringing in developers who are investors in your community. And while you might look at a housing development, or you might not like it, or you don't like this particular model or this particular guy, understand one thing. That the developers that come into your community are making an investment in you. They are the ones who decide and determine that there's a future in Fort Erie. They are the ones who say, wait a minute, I can make money here. I'm going to invest way ahead of the curve. I'm going to buy some land, I'm going to develop it, we're going to go through all the process of making subdivisions, we're going to go through the process of sales, we're going to go through all those processes, because ultimately we're going to make some money in Fort Erie. And when we looked at this around 10, 11 years ago, there was 7. Now we have 23 major developers. And those people sit around the table in a separate session, which we call our Developers Roundtable. And they tell us the same thing. They will feed us information, they talk about their companies, they're very pragmatic about what they think is right and what they are wrong. And that's because, like the industrial leaders, they trust us. They trust us to take the information and not resource it back to them. They trust us to be able to bring it forward to council and say with integrity, these are some issues you need to pay attention to, and this is where you can help business. Now it's up to councils to do that, not up to us. Our job is to gather and share that information. We also go through media, we go through government agencies, we go through statistics, and we pull it all together. And we analyze that data, and we come up from our experience, from our professional experience, we take a look at it and say, here's what we know about Fort Erie, and here's how it applies. This year has been very interesting, because we've developed some patterns and trends over the years. And today, or this year, we've had some eureka moments. We've needed to have 4 or 5 years, once we identified those trends and patterns, to be able to put cross-correlation, to be able to validate what we're saying here today. And so we're going to go through that, and we hope you enjoy it, you can learn from it, hopefully, and you can apply it even more, because this should explain where you are in the economy of Fort Erie, in the economy of Niagara, in the economy of Ontario and Canada. Okay, so the first thing that happens is, let's talk about the tourism sector. We get challenged all the time. Why don't we deal with a restaurant, or why can't we do this, or why are we always talking about the speedway or marina or things like that? Well, quite frankly, we have an open door policy. We've always had an open door policy. Any business that has problems comes in, talks to us. I pick up the phone every time. There's not a phone that I don't pick up and they're not screened. Okay? The only reason that my assistant picks up the phone, my executive assistant, is because I'm on the other phone. Simple as that. We talk to everybody in Fort Erie, they're ratepayers. We provide them all the due respect of being a business person or somebody with a concern over business. And we deal with a huge amount of people every year. But what seems to get the attention is the big projects. And the reason that we're looking for big projects is pretty simple. Efficiency of your dollars towards our staff, efficiency of our expenditures and our energies, all right? So, if we can bring in a major speedway, there's a lot of restaurants going to develop over this. When you bring in 2.5 million more people a year, everybody's going to benefit from this. So there are things that we call attractors and businesses we call feeders. And the feeders feed off of the attractors. So if we're going to be efficient and effective, then that's what we focus on. I want to tell you, the idea for the Speedway came from us, through us. And we had already prepared our analysis, and when the contacts came about this, they were surprised that we were ready and could prove Fort Erie was the best location in Canada for a speedway of the 21st century. The proponents have changed, the site has changed, but it's always stayed in Fort Erie. We went out when the Niagara Parks were trying to close down our little marina up on the parkway, and went out to national tenders, and my board of directors supported us, encouraged us to do that, because that's what we do in economic development. We take problems, turn them into solutions. We went out to a national tender, international actually, and we went out there and we found companies that were willing to come in and do major investments at the scale of $100 to $200 million. And we introduced them to Niagara Parks, and they've been there for 6 years. We've brought in projects with our Israeli billionaires who own the track, and we've got a couple others in the wings. So everybody out there is looking and saying to me, "Do you think we're going to get the track? What's the matter with those people? What the heck? Why is it taking so long?" And it's pretty simple. Look in the mirror. I'm telling you, we went to a meeting 2.5 years ago with the ambassadors from Kuwait and the Canadian folks, and these investors saying, "Look, we have $2 billion invested in Ontario. What's the matter with you people? Don't you want the jobs? Don't you want the money? Don't you want the economic impact?" So there's got to be some reconciliation between what you understand and think and what the real facts are. And the real facts are that we continue in Ontario, we continue in Niagara to throw barriers against development. Business is a dirty word at the region. I'll stand here and I'll say it on top of the bridge. They do not understand, nor do they care about it. That's why the growth is so huge. There are people at the region, there are people on regional government that do care, but they seem to be outnumbered by the bureaucrats that don't. And there's lots of reasons that I could argue. I could spend 2 hours just debating that. I'd be glad to do that anytime. But business is what's good. We have enough regulations in Ontario. We have enough media that pay attention to everybody. That the regulations and the rules that are out there need to be modified, especially in a time when we're in deficit, especially when we're in a time where unemployment is around 8.5%, when we can accelerate good business. Are you telling me that all the people in Queen's Park, that all the people at the region and our council can't pick out a good business opportunity? Do you not think that they could look and see somebody raping the environment? Come on now. These are good projects, and the toughest job has been to hold on to these developments, okay? To hold on to them. And that's a testament to how well the investors at the marina, the investors at the Speedway think that Fort Erie is the right place to be. Take pride in that. Go out and ask that second question. When somebody asks you or tells you the same thing, "It's been around forever," tell them why. Learn why. It will make you feel much better. Try not to be that person looking in the mirror and saying, "The enemy is me." So that's why we focus on the attractors. Now let's talk about some facts that we've put together. This is the state of not only our economy, this is the state of Ontario when it comes to the tourism sector and the global impacts. If you look at this, the dotted line is the day trippers coming to Ontario. Day trippers, people that come for a day, maybe 2. The solid line is the value of the Canadian currency. This is probably the worst type of graph that an economist would ever want to see, unless the red line was my cost of production and the blue line was my sales price. Okay? That's the only way. But what it's telling you is there's a direct inverse curve, inverse relationship. between the value of the Canadian dollar and the amount of tourists that come here. This seems like it's obvious that we've watched the Canadian dollar change, but the implications of this have not been obvious and haven't really been exploited out there or explained. When we're looking at the Canadian dollar, we all know that it's changed, and we're going to get into some more facts and fun facts on this in a second. But it tells us one thing. It tells us for certain that the day trippers were price sensitive to begin with. Okay? I don't know of anybody that picked this up or picked this out. So when we had, in 1998, 24 million people coming from Western New York and from Eastern Michigan into Ontario, because of the value of the Canadian dollar was at $1.4950. They weren't just coming to take a bargain. They were price sensitive to begin with. And what that tells you, if you're in the tourism business, is price is not the only thing. You're going to have to compete not on price, but you're going to have to compete on that value proposition. We've been talking about this for 5 years. You need to create a value proposition where people will come over, people will buy, people will visit your location. Because I can tell you, even at $1.49 dollar, where Americans were getting basically 50% more money, they weren't buying gasoline here. They weren't buying booze. They weren't buying chicken, okay? There are things that they're not going to buy here no matter what, because we still can't compete. But they were buying pork. People still buy pork. They think pork is the best thing going. They weren't buying sports. They got sports. They don't need sports from us. I don't know how many people from hockey fans in Buffalo go to Toronto Maple Leafs, but I can tell you how many people go to the Sabres. It's like 10 or 12% of their marketplace is Canadians. So it tells us things. And once we understand that, it gives us a better advantage to compete in terms of our businesses. But I'll tell you what, they were price sensitive. And if you want them back, you're going to have to try to get them back by offering them something more than a low price. So tourism, how it used to be. 10 years ago, there were 10,000 visitors a day coming to Fort Erie. That's 3.5 million people, okay? The US Day same-day crossings from 98 went from 22 million to, in 2011, 5 million. So this is for Ontario. 75%, pretty close to, I don't have my glasses on here, pretty close to 17 million people are not here anymore, stopping in to buy your products. It is a tough place. Peace Bridge crossings went down from 3 to 2.4, and when you look at the number of people in the cars, you can tell there's a whole lot more people. So same-day crossings down by 77% for day trippers in people terms, in car terms down 20%, and in OLG slot revenues down 74%. So now it's zero because they're just out of here. But overall it's down 74% because the vast majority of the OLG operations and slots were along borders. This is not just unique to Fort Erie. You're not unique in this. This is affecting us all. This is affecting Ontario. So where we once had slots, racetrack, and bingos, no slots now, maybe no track. We're fighting hard against that, of course. We never give up, but maybe no track. And you got a tough bingo market. So you can look at passports and you can say that's an issue. You can say SARS, you can say everything. But really the deal is they're price sensitive, and those are nothing but excuses. When we break out the scale of the crossings and all these cross-correlating pieces of information we use, you can see the blips. You can see the blips when the passport issue is in the newspaper. It lasts 6, 7 months and then it recovers. You can see SARS and Mad Cow and all this kind of stuff. They're blips for a while. They occupy the front page of the newspaper. They set in mind people's ideas of what the problems are. But what we're looking at is these are excuses. And I can just ask you that. I've never seen a more binational community in my life than Fort Erie. We've proven it now. We've analyzed it. We know that this is the most binational community in pretty much all of Canada. Save and except that weird place in Vancouver, you know, where America's north of Canada. So, ask them, go see your friends. Ask them why they're not coming. They'll tell you, passport, bridge. You think they're going to tell you, look, I just can't afford it? Never, never. So we need to look beneath that. As professionals, people in business, if we're going to understand our clients, we need to look into that. So, if you take a look at the next slide, please. It is a tough place to do business. You know, just look at this place, Bridgewater. Fabulous place, been around a long, long time. Used to be probably 70–80%, if I'm not mistaken, American. And look at the challenge they have here. The challenge to keep this place up, to keep this, maintain this property, to keep it running. And I'm a member here. And so I've watched the board of directors, I watched the president, I watched Rocco come up with many ways of testing and trying this. And so it's changing. It's tough, but it's changing, and I know they're going to be successful. But you know how it changes? Wow, I bet you there's more women in this club than ever in history. Would that be right?
Probably.
Probably, because they are now focusing on women coming out to golf. You know, some guys are going to have a little bit of a problem with that, especially when they see somebody knock the ball about 60 yards past. Hard for any of us to take that. But that's where they're looking for other markets. They're looking for ways of maintaining that membership status, but still finding new ways to generate income. And that's what you have to do. It's not easy. It's trial and error, but you really have to create that value proposition. And we have to grow this economy. You're looking at the youth and why they go out. Well, first of all, pretty much many youth want to leave. That's called flying the nest. They do it for birds, they do it for tigers, mother bears kick their little bears out. They gotta go. And God help them for going too, because if they stayed their entire life in Fort Erie, and if they didn't have the money to travel, what would they look like? What would they do? What would they learn? Nothing, everything would be from TV. So they gotta go out there like the rest of us and experience different cultures. They gotta experience different places, learn new language, new things, eat new food. Well, the opportunity to come back is what we want. We want to create a vibrant economy where they can come back if they choose and raise their families, and that's what's critical. But even with summer students, come on. You know, I come from a border town. I know what happens. I know how easy it was to get a job when you're 16 years old at Algoma Steel. I know what happened here. Everybody that needed a job in the summertime used to get a job at the duty-free, used to get a job at the border with customs and immigration, or they'd work in one of the major plants. That's no longer the case, right? You know, where were the people when these guys were strapping on guns at the border saying, well, how are all these 300–400 kids going to have jobs? They can't strap the guns on. That's the end of that. So there are things that we want to happen, but we don't put them in context, and there are greater consequences. One thing that we do have in tourism that's not being well serviced, well exploited, is that we have 1,770 properties at the last time we counted it. American ownership on Lake Erie and in Crystal Beach and Ridgeway. And we know from direct interviews in 2004 with every one of them, as we did surveys with them, face to face, that they account for about 10,000 people here in the summertime. And those 10,000 people, if they're only here for 3 months, equals 1.2 million days. There are 1.2 million tourist days. And when I talk to the public at large and they say, well, I hear your tourism's out. Well, then what would you do if I could bring 1.2 million people to your business? And by the way, they're not concerned about passports. They have $1 million properties here. They pay taxes year-round, and very high taxes on the water. And they only use the services for 3 or 4 months. So sometimes we can't see the forest for the trees. Sometimes we don't take advantage of what we have in our backyard. Sometimes we forget that the best fruit is the low-hanging fruit. And sometimes we really have to get up in the morning and look in that mirror and wonder who our enemy is, right? We have an entire cohort that if we work well with them, and serviced them well, they would respond. So, value proposition is the key, and I'm hoping the Chamber can help you with various things in the future with guest speakers and things to talk about how best to do that. We certainly would help. And so now let's talk about this exchange for a minute, because it's really critical to get a handle on this. In 2000 to 2012, what cost $100 in the year 2000 now costs $128. In Canada, CPI, the inflation index, is 28%. In the US, it's 34%. So hold on to those numbers for a second. So a Canadian shopping in the US with $100 in the year 2000 got $67 worth of value. That's all they could buy. In 2012, they get $103 worth of value. And so it's a 53.7% increase in the purchasing power of Canadians over where they were in the year 2000. And if you look at an American coming to Canada, they used to get in the year 2000, if you looked at $100, to equate that back to where it would be in today's dollar terms, you add the CPI, it's $134. So they need $134 today to try to buy what they were in the year 2000, and instead they're getting $97. In their mind, it's a 27% increase. So we looked at this and said, well, these numbers seem very obvious. Nobody's really picking them out this way. Why would that be? What is it that we could possibly figure out was happening? And the eureka moment was muscle memory. You all heard about muscle memory. That's why we practice the golf swing, so we can get it wrong every time. Okay? Well, it seems the same thing happens with this muscle, the gray muscle between our ears. If you look at who we're talking about, forget these as being statistics for a minute. Try to apply them to real people, to human beings, to faces, to people you know. Why would your friends come from Toronto and stand in line on the bus or stand in line on the bridge for 3 hours over in Lewiston, both ways, to go shopping in the States? We take it for granted here. Quite frankly, we're a lot smarter. We know how to get across the border without waiting 3 hours either way, right? But they do it. And why aren't the Americans coming over and buying our products like they were? Well, it's called muscle memory. First of all, anybody that's traveling like that pretty much has to have a license, and these days you gotta be 18. So you remember 2000. You remember as a 6-year-old, you couldn't get that bike over there because it cost too much money, and you didn't understand that it was only $200, but your dad said it's gonna cost me $3. Okay? Didn't understand it then. But anybody who's older than 18 will remember this always. It's in the back of your head. And so whether you realize it or not, when you're across the border shopping, you feel it. You feel it in your wallet. You feel it in your soul. You feel like you're getting value. I can buy jewelry here I never bought before. I can do stuff that I never did before. And it's quite simple. We're economists. We'll show you. This is how it works. But the same thing works in reverse for the U.S. They are accustomed and price sensitive to coming over here and getting $1.49. And what they have now is a 27% decrease in the actual dollars. They feel like they're getting no value. They feel like it's not worthwhile. And that does not include the fact that they're never buying gas here or chicken, okay? And they're not coming to a hockey game. So, if you wanted to see another example, and Adam's fond of this one, he came up with it. In the year 2000, if you wanted to buy a $100 golf club at Dick's Sports, it cost you $149.50. And in the year 2012, if you're comparing it to the same value as then, it would cost you $134 at Dick's today. So you're now spending that much less for the same golf club. And you remember this, and you think it's a bargain. Okay? Well, clearly it is. But that's how it is. So it has completely reversed itself when you dig down and analyze the statistics. I don't know of a lot of people that understand this, but this is a huge competitive advantage for you. We probably shouldn't have had the press here and let them know. We should have had a tight little business unit here and come out swinging, you know. So where we get this thing from with the U.S. cohort is in the year 2003. We did a year-long major analysis. We even brought in some professional economists so that the things weren't tainted by myself or my staff. And the analysis wasn't tainted. And we found out that 64% of Fort Erie's economy at the time is based directly on U.S. investment, branch plants, exporting, tourism traffic, local residential assessment, retail, commercial patronage. 64%. As a result of the American investment in Fort Erie, more than 3,162 direct and indirect jobs are available in Fort Erie. Infrastructure investment represents, that's directly controlled or reliant upon U.S. investment is 33%, $56 million. And the assessment in the town of the 1,775 properties is $277 million. Now this is something that any business person understands. You pay attention to this. This is important. In the industrial sector, Fort Erie's industrial base is mostly U.S. branch plants and Canadian companies primarily exporting to the United States. And that represents most manufacturing employment, which by far is the most employment. Historically, they're well-focused, solid base of companies, and they all are export dollars. Export dollars means we're getting like U.S. currency or another major currency and bringing it in. It's actually worth more in the economy than a Canadian dollar is if you earned it in Canada, and that's just economics, that it goes through the economy a different way. And with the exchange rates of the time, the big advantage for these companies was to build in Canadian dollars and sell in US dollars. And we've been telling council, informing them, informing the public, that there's been some huge transitions with our companies in order to adjust. It not only is the dollar going down, but that means they're selling for less. There's less of a spread. So they have to become more efficient, more effective, and find markets elsewhere. They can't just rely on the traditional markets. And some of our companies have been doing exceedingly well at doing that. One of which is Vertus, and I'll get to that later. So ease of access to and from the U.S., it's in the transportation of goods. Exchange rates, fuel rates are critical issues to our companies and competitiveness. And so if you look at that U.S. dollar, Canada dollar graph again, you can see that for the most part, exports were going down. Oops, next slide. Exports have been going down over the years as the Canadian dollar's been going up. You can see where there's been some adjustments in efficiency and changes in marketing. Industry is ahead of smaller business in this regard. More resources, more people, bigger dollars to deal with, but that's pretty much why. And so despite some normalization as the Canadian dollar strengthened against U.S. exports from Ontario to the U.S. have fallen overall, but hopefully there's a trend turning that around. So let's talk about then what it is that drives industry. There's three fundamental things. There's the cost of labor, there's the cost of energy, and there's the cost of capital. Okay? This is not something this council or previous councils haven't heard from us, but it really comes to bear today. This is hypercritical time to understand these things. So if you're looking at this triangle, it's just much like the firemen use. You cannot have fire unless you have a source of fuel, you have oxygen, and a source of ignition. Remove one of those things, and you don't have fire. And that's what they do as firemen. They know that. Can I get rid of the oxygen? Can I contain the fire with smothering it with baking soda type of extinguishers? Can I remove the fuel just by pushing it into the lake or pulling it out? And so that's how you work on these things. And in our case, when you're looking at industry, it's the cost of labor, the cost of capital, which is borrowing money, or the cost of energy. Well, over this period, the cost of energy, gas has gone up 112%. Hydro's gone up 49%. But natural gas has declined by 78%. So, a lot of industry relies on natural gas, and it's probably one of the cheapest times in terms of the ability to attract a company with that element of the cost of energy and the reliability of that energy in Canada. So it's a good thing. It's a good thing. When you look at the cost of capital, we're going to show you a graph in a minute where for the last 20 years, actually we're lower than pretty much the last 60 years if you don't take the little blip in the late 80s. And then when you're looking at the unemployment, when you're looking at the cost of labor, number one, we look at unemployment. It's at 8.2%. To a lot of people, that's terrible, that's terrible. Okay, it is. It means that typically there's anywhere over 4%. Government will tell you, statisticians will tell you, you need about 4% unemployed. That doesn't mean they're all out of work for no particular reason. If you don't have about that much, then you don't have anybody who can buy labor. They can't go out and find somebody who needs a job that might have their skills. So then you bring in immigration. That's how that works. There's a ratio there. But for us at 8.2%, we know our neighbors are part of that number. It's not just a number, it's a real thing to us. There are people who are unemployed. But that also means to industry that we got people here that typically wouldn't be out of work, that they have skills, they've been in the labor force, and they're available. And because there's enough of them, they might work for a little less money. So, if you're trying to attract an industry, this is a big sales pitch. And if you're looking at the unemployment rate, it's the first time, I'll show you that. So the real cost of labor, though, when we calculate in the CPI, real cost of labor, is they're at 20.8% increase between the years 2001 and 2010. The cost of CPI is exactly the same, basically. So what that tells you is people in the industry are only making the same wages that they were in the year 2001. This is a bargain. They're being paid at 10-year-old equivalency rates. This is a bargain. So we have a bargain in labor. We have an availability of people who are skilled and have been in the workforce. We have the lowest cost of energy for production in many, many years. And the cost of capital is its lowest than it's been in a long, long time. 20 years for sure. And if you look at that little blip where I bought my house in 1974, I think it was, at 17.75%. Everybody told me that was a bargain, right? 6 months later, it was over. But aside from that, we now have the lowest value in terms of the cost of money in about 60 years. Next slide, please. So, what does this mean? It means a couple things, and we've analyzed this in cross-referencing. We can't reconcile, we had a hard time reconciling why our industries that are successful are telling us that they have concerns over their labor force because they don't want to work overtime. So we jumped into that and helped analyze that. That they have been working overtime for three years, you know? And then we started looking at what the antithesis of that. We asked the next question. And we started to look at this 8.2%, and we started to look at the time frames that people are unemployed that had been working. And we found out that in fact, they've been laid off longer and longer. It's gone from around 12 weeks up to 52 weeks and could go beyond. And in the United States, it's 2 and 3 years. So what does that tell you? It tells you that if you're working, you are probably under stress and demands to be working overtime because the companies don't want to take the risk yet to hire new people and absorb those costs. And you're getting a bit tired of working on Saturdays or double shifts. And it tells you that if you haven't been working, the likelihood right now of getting a job quickly is not very good. Okay? And so it comes down to this. If you've got income, you haven't got a clue what the recession is. Have no clue. Haven't stopped spending. Might have pulled back a bit, but you haven't got a clue. And if you got no income, you got a depression. Because no income, depression. So these guys out there in the world are talking about recessions. And you know the difference between a recession and depression? It's a recession when you don't have a job. It's friggin' depressing when I don't have a job, okay? So I've skipped that recession stuff because I don't want to befuddle anybody's mind. It's pretty clear. If you're working, you're doing well. And if you're not working, you got a depression. So we got to be sensitive to our labor force. We got to be sensitive to what's going on. And we got to identify to them what can happen to change that, particularly the people that have gotten out of the labor force for no real good reasons on their own, and we're going to get to that. So here's the drivers of manufacturing. We'll flip through these very quickly. You can see that unemployment has been going down since the last 7 years, but what's happened is there is a blip in the US, and at the end here, the last 18 months, but for the first time in a long, long time, Americans have higher unemployment rate than we do. So when you're watching the news, make sure you're watching CTV or understand that you're watching Canadian news as opposed to American numbers, because there is a big difference. In terms of driving capital, you can see the trend lines. It's just been going down. This is the cost of energy. This is gasoline, electricity. So let's talk about the global influence for a second. 15 years ago, this place was known as Fort Erie. Oh, I hated that word passion when I came here. Nobody told me that when they hired me. I didn't learn that until I went to McDonald's and somebody said there's nothing to do in Fort Erie. Ooh. So our mission was to change that. 15 years ago, though, you could look at companies like Urban Industries, Fleet, Rennell, Horton. Before that, Horton Cooley. And they were closing for a lot of reasons. They were closing primarily because of either bad labor relations, and that's clearly was Fleet and Rennell. They were closing down for technology reasons. They were closing down because of competitive reasons. So now we look back and we think, well, here it is again. It's 12, 13 years later and we're going at it again. We've seen DMI, we've seen Virtus, we've seen Patheon. But you know what? There's a huge difference. And it's important that everybody in Fort Erie understand the difference this time around. The difference this time around is it's not whether there's poor labor relations. That's not the case at all. We got great labor relations and we're not overpaid. I just proved that. We're running at 2,000 levels. And it's not the cost of doing business, because the cost of doing business in industry was pretty much the best it's ever been, especially if you want to expand. But it's the global influence. When you look at DMI, we brought them in from the Dakotas. They expanded into Fort Erie to cover the Ontario market for wind towers and predominantly the eastern seaboard. Why? Because there's a transportation premium. You got a great big tower, costs a lot of money to move it, can't scratch it, and if you're too far away, you can't compete. And so they also, after building here, built one in Oklahoma. And you might ask why Canadian Niagara Power is not involved in developing wind turbines and alternate energy like that. And I asked that question many years ago, got a good answer, kind of believed it, which was they're a utility company, they know where their core strengths are, they know how they can service that and do the best they can, and be the best they can at what they do. But they had ventured into small alternative energy, and it didn't work out for them. So, okay, yeah, okay, that's a good reason. And here we go 8 years later, and we're looking at DMI. DMI is a company out of the Dakotas. It's owned by Ottertail. Ottertail Industries is a huge utility company in the States where they have actually much better opportunity to make money in cogeneration and energy and things like that than here. And they just decided, we're out of the business. This is not working for us. We're out of the business. So clearly CNP was 7 or 8 years ahead of them. But the byproduct of that was an American public corporation killing off its industry in Fargo, its industry in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we're the byproduct, we're the collateral damage in Fort Erie. But not due to cost of production, this was one of the best. Not due to labor, very competitive wages, very excellent skills, a lot of tradesmen. Now the impact on Fort Erie is those jobs are gone. And it didn't help that other companies jumped into this business. That's where our labor went. They're over there, they're in Windsor. And now there's a company that's trying to do it in Niagara, and they're having great difficulty attracting tradespeople. When you look at Vertus, this is a travesty. I don't know if you're following this, but this is a company that went bankrupt in Delaware and walked into Canada. And from what we can tell, they just decided to close everybody down, gave them 10 minutes notice, and said, we're not paying a severance and we're not paying you notice period. They're not bankrupt in Canada, not at all. And they haven't filed for bankruptcy in Canada. There needs to be more from our government. There needs to be more from the Ministry of Labour in Ontario, and there needs to be more concern over this from our MP and Minister of Justice and the Government of Canada. It should not be right that somebody can walk in here and pee all over the rules and regulations of Ontario and mistreat our residents and the people working at Vertus, because this plant was profitable. This plant was more than capable of competing, and they had major contracts, and they're sucking them back to the U.S. That's what they want. I mean, they literally emulate Michael Douglas in Wall Street. You saw that movie? Huh? You know Michael Douglas, that old guy, right? Wasn't old when we saw him. And then you look at Patheon. I mean, Pharmedics started in Fort Erie. It was a management and employee buyout of a company that wasn't doing well, and they built it up, and they went around the world. And by the time they started going around the world and had 9 plants and were a public corporation, and they start to change who the CEO is and who the board is, all of a sudden they look back in Fort Erie and go, you know what, we don't do over-the-counter drugs anymore. We're into RX-style drugs, and maybe we should sell it while it's ahead. And to the credit of Patheon, they went out and they just didn't pick anybody. They tried to make a perfect match for Fort Erie. And they tried to find a company where the perfect match would be there, because this was a profitable company. And when the company took over, everything seemed to be going well, and it wasn't. Eventually, the company lost their license to produce in Quebec. And as a result of that, they sold the company in Quebec for peanuts. But many of you will remember that everybody's opinion in Fort Erie was, gee, they sold Quebec, but not Fort Erie. What's the matter with us? But the second question wasn't asked. Council was briefed on this. I'm hoping that they told everybody the facts, but the facts were pretty clear. They sold the Quebec plant because it was worthless. And the company that bought it for pennies on the dollar. The reason that the owners kept Fort Erie was because it had value. It had contracts, had value, and it's still operating today. Okay? They're still running down those contracts, and we also brought another company in to buy part of it and to start it up. Small, 12 employees right now, but they're doing the enzyme plant, and the reason that it's not open today is because their principal customer had a fire. So they're waiting for them to rebuild, and they'll be back in business. It's just the way business goes. So you can take pride in the fact that we've had this major paradigm shift in Fort Erie. It's not Fort Erie. This has nothing to do with our labor. Our labor have proven time and time again that they're competitive. Our labor force is not only competitive, but they're a good value, they're a good bargain. But when it comes to industry, we have talked to our businesses. We know there are jobs out there, and the point I made to council, which ties back to the donut store high, and ties back to the fact they need to ask the second question and tell people the truth, is pretty simple. When somebody comes up to you and says, Fort Erie is dreary, there's nothing, there's no future, you know, tell them the facts. Sit down and say, wait a minute, do you really want an answer? I'll give you the answer, it's going to take you a minute. And tell them, look, we have companies in Fort Erie that can't get people to fill the jobs. That these are ideal for candidates in Fort Erie. That our problem with them from the Economic Development Corporation side is that we're concerned that if the companies can't get the skills they need, they're going to go elsewhere. That's what our concern is, and shame on us. But when it comes to employment, there are lots of agencies out there that should know about this and should be able to help people retrain for these jobs. And what I told council, quite simply, and I'm going to repeat verbatim, is that these jobs, these higher skilled jobs, are not for the illiterate. They're not for the people that don't want to put in a full day's work, and they're not for the uneducated. Now, this is nothing that I haven't said for 4 years. So if somebody was really paying attention to this budget, and I know all of you and your families and your friends have seen this every year, and you read it faithfully, and you, yeah, sure. But if you hadn't, you could have said to your kids who are 14 years old, 15, 16 years old, hey, let's talk to them and find out what kind of jobs are at some of these companies. And you would have had 4 years to prepare. If you did it the year after, it would be 3 years to prepare. You'd be there now. And so the question is, look in the mirror and see who the enemy really is. Okay? Look in the mirror and see, if you want to change the output, you must change the input. We have Deanna DiMartino here. Even my staff, Adam has been on the board. I don't know if he's still on the board of the Literacy Council. There are people out there trying to address this issue. I'm not the one that creates or tells people that Niagara is the second highest illiteracy rate in the province. That's the facts. That's what we're told by the Stats Canada. That's what we're told by the agencies. We're not the ones that are telling you that Fort Erie is one of the highest in Niagara. That's just a fact. What we do is bring it to your attention, and from our standpoint, in our narrow little sector of where we advise government, it's to say we have people that are capable, they need the learning, and they need training. What's missed as well is the inequity that confronts labor in Fort Erie. I've talked to our regional councillor, John Thiel, and the mayor, and council many times, because if you're in Northern Ontario, let's say, a place like I come from, Sault Ste. Marie, if you don't have a job in Sault Ste. Marie, you are not thumbing it 2 3/4 hours to Sudbury on a 2-lane highway in the wintertime and getting to work on time. It's just not going to happen. If you're unemployed there, you got a problem. Better figure out how to create a business for yourself or get a job or move. When you're in Niagara, it's a different story. Traditionally, there are people that are very buoyant. You can go to Niagara Falls people go here. Welland people, we go to Welland, they come here. In fact, we have 15,000 people in the Fort Erie labor force. And fully, more than 5,800 people a day leave to go work someplace else. That's a third of our force, last time we checked. And about as many people come from outside and come into our jobs, our businesses. So it's a very transparent and a very buoyant economy. The problem being, if you follow along with our correlation, if you're unemployed, and you're unemployed for a long time, first thing you might want to do is sell that car. That is the number one thing that happens after people get over denial. When they're unemployed and they realize they got to do something to protect their family, they sell the car because insurance is high, because the cost of operating is high, and the cost of carrying the car is high. Well, let's just get on a bus and go to Brock University. Let's just get on a bus and go to U of T and get our master's. Let's just get on a bus. Every 15 minutes it comes by and we'll go over to the college. Can't do that. Councillor Thiel talked to me about it, and I saluted the region for putting in intermunicipal transport. What I've said is it isn't enough and it's not targeted well enough. Think about the customers. Don't think about trying to put people on the bus who can pay for the route. Think about putting it where people can use it and then go from there. And we got to have it consistent, and we got to have it reliable so that people can rely on it and use it. And then maybe more people will be able to go to the higher centers of learning. But there are a lot of great institutions in Fort Erie. There's a lot of government agencies. There's a lot of good organizations trying to help people understand that they need to increase their skills in computers. They need to increase their skill sets of literacy, and they need to get continuing education. If you're going to be successful, every day is a learning experience. Never stop learning. It was coined a long time ago. If you're going to be successful, you have to adopt lifelong learning. So, people will leave. Stop telling the world we don't want our kids to leave. If you looked in the mirror, you would say that's not true. You might hate to see them leave, we all do as parents, but they gotta go. They gotta go to school someplace. We don't have a major university in Fort Erie. They gotta go someplace to get a job. And depending on what they do and what their interests are, it may not lie in Fort Erie. So encourage them to do the best and prepare them. That's what we as parents do. But we really need to make Fort Erie a more positive place, and we really need to make it a place where our kids can come back. Bring those skills and experience back, and that's where the strength of the future is. So how can Fort Erie differentiate itself? This is an important thing because eventually now people are going to understand what we're talking about, and they're all going to have the same competitive advantage thanks to us pointing some things out. Fort Erie has to be able to say to investors who can put their money anywhere, that we want you, we're going to have better customer service than anybody else, we will get you through the development cycle faster than anybody else, and responsibly, and we're going to respect you and your business and the employees you bring in. Okay? It does no good to talk negative about this community, and I don't see why anybody would want to. I'm just trying to explain to you why you should be proud, why you should stand up and tell people the facts, because the facts are good. You know, we have tried for 10 years to present ourselves to the government of Ontario that we are the little engines that could. You know, the reason that we have respect for Kim Creator and he has respect for us is we have never, ever gone to the province with a problem that we didn't first figure out a solution to. We never beg. I am proud to say that Mayor Martin has his knees intact, even though they replaced the knees. You don't see any wear marks on his pants from begging down and making an argument that we need something, right? And so in future, when you're looking at how to present people, if you want to talk to politicians, I'll tell you a couple rules. You can be really well received by the Premier or the province by saying, you need to do this. They love to hear that, okay? That's almost as good as, I pay your salary, okay? You are just not going to get anywhere there. Our job at the EDC, amongst the 4 mandates we have, is to represent Fort Erie and to go out beyond the borders and tell people the truth and the facts. And this is a story we've been telling for 10 years. What they do in this town is up to you. And like I say, remember Pogo, look in the mirror. So we need to stick to Plan A. Plan A has been in place. We have an economic strategy. I can't help it if people here want to change or councillors choose to see the words on the paper differently. Okay? But we have a plan. We work together with staff and council and the public, and we've come up with plans. We need to provide better customer service, faster, no waits, the place to be, deliver on promises, become developer and investor friendly again. Be more aggressive on a strategy for change. The PSWs are horrendous. They are killing us. The mayor put it well. First of all, they restricted us to our urban service boundaries. If you don't know what that is, that's an imaginary line on a map. And it's a little dotted line that says, this is where you have sewers and this is where you don't, and don't go outside. And so we have sewers up in Crystal Beach. We have sewers in Ridgeway. We have sewers in Stevensville. We have sewers in downtown Fort Erie. We have to put sewer lines between the sewer treatment plant and all the way over to Crystal Beach. Now, that's a long stretch. What every other community would be allowed and has been allowed to do in the past is build houses along that route, and everybody pays their fair share of that line. They're telling you that's not going to happen. So I think, don't hold me to this. Perhaps Ron Tripp, in his previous incarnation as the director of community services infrastructure, engineering basically, can tell you. But I believe that the average in a place like Toronto, sewer and water lines is about 40 feet. And in Niagara, it's something like 8 kilometers. And in Fort Erie, it was 12 or 16 kilometers. You have to pay for that. Get some TVs, throw them out the window. I ain't going to take this anymore. Come on. If you want to talk to a politician, talk to them about this. This is absurd. not only are you paying taxes, not only are you paying taxes to the province, you're paying for their policy that says, oh, we don't want you developing an on-Nye road anymore. Eee, so we like to come from downtown Toronto and see the farms. Yeah, well, nobody can earn a living on those. And we got sewer and water that's very expensive. And you know what? Your kids are paying for them. Because 30 to 40 years from the time you put them in the ground, you got to replace them. And they'll be 300% more expensive. This is a debt being saddled on your future. Okay? So, the other thing is, OMB issues. Anybody for $125 can hold up a $400 million project. Okay? This is sad. You tell me that this government can't look at these projects and say, this is an irresponsible request, or we've seen it before, or we have the answer. They're so engaged in process because they just don't want to deal with the issue. And it's us that's paying for it. Land availability. I can't help it. I tell you, we just don't have industrial land. I don't know where you're going to grow. You can project growth all you want, but somebody has to pay for it. You need jobs for people. And we don't have enough industrial land. We just don't. And so we need 200 to 300 acres of industrial land, service ready to go. We have none. Okay. So get council on side, prepared, and they should be proactive, not reactive, was our advice to them. And then, if you challenge any of this about why we shouldn't be ready for business, and you got to remember that we wrote this back in December and submitted it to the town. But even last night, they're just starting to understand. They're starting to look at the fact that we had said that businesses have more money and cash in the bank than ever before. They have been holding on to their money. This is money that they should be investing in new equipment. This is money they should be in expanding their market. This is money that they should be putting into expanding their product lines, and they're holding on to it. Why? Muscle memory. The same people that run the plants today can recall taking that money, taking their money, and let's put it into the e-bubble. Let's put it into Google. Let's put it into anything on the internet that looks like it's going to be good because somebody told me it was worth $12 billion. Well, that lasted for 18 months and burst, but a lot of people lost their money. And then their brokers basically told them, look, you have all this money coming in, you got this huge cash flow, you're doing well as a company, well, I know, here's the better thing, let's put it into real property. Well, even better than real property, let's put it into these funny mortgages. And they did, and in 2008 they lost that. So anybody who's in business, anybody who's got a major industry out there looking to expand, they've been pounding that money away, okay? And they're not going to put it in willy-nilly. And they know, though, at some point in time, and this is the important thing to appreciate, it's called pent-up demand. At some point in time, no matter what hit them, no matter what distracts them, they understand that business or they wouldn't be wealthy, they wouldn't be successful. And they know they got to reinvest. And at some point in time, a percentage of that reinvestment is new company expansion. They got to find a place to expand. And if they put everything on rubber tires, then it's up for grabs for everybody. And our goal is to have the reputation, to have the land, and to have the services, and have the attitude and approach and procedures in place to snap up that pent-up demand, to be able to compete fairly. We've got all this risk money sitting there, and last night on the news they told you that. They've showed the various companies with billions of dollars. We've been telling you this since Christmas. It's the lowest interest rates in history, the best time to invest. We've got employment that means it's a competitive advantage both from wages and availability. Energy costs, well, they're always increasing, but some of them are really down, and we've got a constant, steady supply of electricity and natural gas, and in Fort Erie we've got a very reliable supply, and that's one of the things we've been working with Canadian Niagara Power on to support, is they have reliability, which is they've been investing in capital in Fort Erie over and over and over again. And that's to be able to make it more reliable so that when we attract business here, that reliability factor is a huge component to that. We got servicing problems on our lands and PSWs that we got to deal with. And you think that these arguments would bode well with the province. But what happens is somebody throws up the environmental thing and nobody wants to touch it. Ooh, they just created with the PSWs a piece of poor legislation. We've shown them this, we've brought it to their attention, they admit it, but they won't change it because they just don't have the political fortitude to correct it. And it's not just going to be Fort Erie. Niagara Falls is getting hit now. Then it's going to be St. Catharines, and it'll keep on moving towards Toronto. When they get everything mapped in Ontario, there's going to be a lot more people screaming than just Fort Erie. The development costs. Too much time and money in the process. Development charges versus taxes. Every industry thinks you're picking their pocket. Cost beyond the property line. That's the next thing. Not only do we charge you for what's happening on your property, not only do we charge you taxes once you build forever, not only do we charge you permits and fees to do all this stuff, but now, you know what? The government says, yeah, maybe you're going to put too many trucks on the QEW, so we need a 5th lane, or we need a new overpass. How is this possible to attract business? How can we possibly be business friendly in Ontario, let alone Niagara, let alone Fort Erie? Labor costs. Limited pool of skills and availability is not our issue. What we need to do is expand the skills, look forward to what these new companies are doing and what the expansion is. Simply talk to somebody in Europe out there, talk to somebody at Fleet. Fleet is hiring. We restarted Fleet. We helped start Fleet. We got the president. We did the feasibility analysis out of the Economic Development Corporation. We helped them staff up, and we still own the first share that was ever made at Fleet. Okay? We are a partner in Fleet. We still have a share worth a lot of money. The reason we hold on to it isn't because of an investment. It's because if anything happens to that company, we have intervener status with the courts. We don't want to do all this and find out someday somebody replaces Glenn Stansfield or somebody buys it and they want to move it out. We got some say in this. Okay? We're thinking down the road. That's what we do. And we're trying to protect you as business people, you as residents, and your interests and your investments. As far as operating costs, if you want to be competitive, you got to deal with the ever-increasing taxes. You got to manage expectations. You got to be more efficient. You got to have the ever-increasing regulations and costs, ever-increasing constraints to trade, and ever-increasing competition with less controls and costs. And I'm very proud to say that I am a member of the management team of Fort Erie, the senior management team, and I can tell you that everybody that's been there, all the senior management team understand this. We have been working for 8 years on this to hone this team and them to hone their staff and feed it down. Okay? This is a fact, and they understand it. So don't look to them when it's budget time. Don't look to them for who or what sets the policies. The council that you elected is fully within their right to make decisions on the policies where they want to spend money. We've talked to the council about this. Not our job, not my job to judge them. I might have a personal opinion because I'm a resident here, but I don't tell people out loud. I don't say it to people. Councils, you gotta respect, have the right to make those decisions. Sometimes it's a style change. Sometimes it's a little different change in what I might want to do if I was in their seat. But you gotta understand, they're the ones that are out there with the public. If the public don't like what they're doing, tell them. Democracy, as the mayor says, is not a spectator sport. Get involved. That's the best thing that business can do. So, next slide. Want me to go for it? Right? Want me to go for it? All right, go for it. Oh, baloney.
Phenomenal. Thanks, Jim. We still have a few minutes, and I'm sure there might be that question floating. If anyone has questions for the panel up here, feel free. Is everybody still absorbing? Martha, go ahead in the back. Who's it for?
It's for Mr. Thibert.
Okay.
I'm curious, I saw the decrease in tourists and day trippers particularly. Is that only tracked by who's coming over the Peace Bridge? Because I've noticed in Crystal Beach a large influx of Ontario plates, people from the GTA. Is there any way to measure that increase?
There are groups out there that do that. I think in terms of tracking that, it's a costly endeavor. Stats Canada tries. Our fundamental problem here in Fort Erie is that we're not a discrete census management unit. So when Stats Canada puts out numbers, even unemployment, it's easier to do it for Niagara because that's where they draw it from and you have higher correlating coefficients in this. But for Fort Erie, which is a component, it's difficult. So for instance, when they look at it's called the labor force survey. They do it every month, but they probably only check somewhere around 400, 600 people in all of Canada. They pick them at random, consistently. For 6 months, they call them and ask them, are you employed or not? Because they've done it at random, because they've done it across the board, and because they've done it for so long, they can develop trends, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's accurate. In our case, we've worked with Stats Canada for that number, and we've paid them for the privilege, because you have to pay for them to help out. And then we actually take the base that they give us as best they can break it down for Fort Erie, and then we go to our companies and call them. And how many people are working, how many people did you lay off, and they tell us. And so we can get to be a pretty accurate record. If you want to source that, you can't, because we've done it, right? And businesses know that we call them. When it comes to the tourists and the traffic, it's something that maybe the BIA wants to do. Retain a summer student or two to check on the number of cars. You could do a survey. We'll help you do that survey. Ask people where they're coming from, how much they spend, and what they're doing. It would be really good.
Thanks. Anybody else have a question for you? Wow.
Well, I will.
Go ahead, Karen.
Jim and I had a little discussion about the provincially significant wetlands, that's the PSWs. And Jim, just further to what we can do as citizens and business owners to try and push the message to those politicians, the incoming and the current ones, to make a difference, that they'll put a backdoor policy clause into the PSWs, and that'll give us more industrial land, right?
Okay, I don't want to get profane when I talk about backdoor. I want you to understand clearly it's a backdoor.
I said it.
There's no, I'm not talking about anything else but, right? Just a backdoor. What Karen is talking about is that when you form legislation, there's a protocol, process, you have to have need. I know I've been in government, we've helped draft stuff, right? I was there for 10 years. But one of the questions that my deputy minister used to ask, and my mentor, was stop and look at the legislation, even after you've been involved with it and you've got what you think is your final draft, and ask the question, does it do any harm? And you have to ask that question, because sometimes with the best intentions, you do some harm. And what's happened here in Fort Erie is the PSWs may be, well, a good piece of legislation. It may have good intent, but it's got provisions in it that do harm on Fort Erie. Now where the problem lies, and we get to the back door, is that typically in any piece of legislation, the minister responsible for that legislation also has the ability to make exceptional circumstances. And there's always a protocol in there that says this is the conditions under which they can do that. They didn't build it into PSWs. And so we had, at the request of Mayor Martin, we had the Minister of Natural Resources of the day. She admitted, she came down to Fort Erie, she had her senior staff, and she said, I'm here because I'm tired of you and Harry and Ron Tripp banging on me at the various meetings for the municipal associations, and so I'm going to come and solve this problem once and for all. I don't think it's a problem. So she sat in Fort Erie and said, look, surely we can do X, Y, Z. And we said, you can't do that. And she said, I said, the legislation doesn't provide for that. She said, well, we did it over here. And I said, ma'am, that's the Endangered Species Act. Now there's a worldwide covenant. There's a worldwide piece of legislation. It deals with lions, tigers, it deals with snakes, it deals with every rare animal in the world, and all the commodities related to it, like ivory. And for around the world, they say that the local minister in charge of that jurisdiction in Ontario, like the Minister of Natural Resources, has the ability to say, this doesn't make sense. So let's say some zealous bureaucrat, for instance, says, you know what, Fort Erie, we're going to have to create a huge preserve right through the industrial land and out towards Stevensville, and we're taking, 20 square miles of land, and we're going to make it wolf habitat, bear habitat, and hippopotamus habitat. And you'd say, well, that's nuts. Ah, no, you're nuts. We took a satellite photo, and right here's a hippopotamus, and over here's a giraffe. Okay, and here's your wolves, and look at the freaking lion. That guy's huge. He's 900 pounds. They go, well, that's zoos. That's Safari Niagara. Doesn't matter, it's habitat. Well, the minister can say, come on, folks. This is a freaking zoo. Go down there and get off your little horses in Toronto and go and see Fort Erie and go to that zoo and see what it's all about. And they would see it's a zoo, and the minister would say, okay, we're going to make sure that that's not tiger habitat and bear habitat. But you see, in PSWs, there's nothing there that allows the minister to do that. And she said, well, I got another one. I got one over here where we took this stream and we put some business. We let them cut the stream bank out, and we had habitat there, and we built the habitat upriver. And the business, in exchange for that, paid money and made sure that the biologists built a better habitat for fish. So yeah. That's the federal fisheries no net loss habitat policy. And there's a little back door in there. It's created by the government of Canada that says you and the minister of this province and every other province can put some common sense to it. And you can fix it. So ma'am, love your attitude, love your approach, love the fact you want to help Fort Erie. You just don't have the authority. And she looked to her senior staff and advisors and says, is that right? And they said, yes, he's right. So, we people in Fort Erie, we pay attention to what we're doing, we know what we're doing. And sometimes we know more than some of the people responsible for it. But it still doesn't make any difference. They have the power. And so we need to know what we're talking about. You need to talk to Kim Crater. We have an opportunity now to kind of change that. It is still going to be difficult. Even with this new premier premier designate, and possibly the next premier-elect, the bureaucrats are the ones, and they're the ones pushing hard on this. I don't understand why. I don't think any of them live here. We've done 12 presentations amongst myself, the past CAO, current CAO, mayor, and they all empathize with us. They all say, that's a terrible thing. Can we do something about it? Not my job. So somebody has to say, look, this hurts the people of Fort Erie. We're in enough predicament now. Ontario needs jobs, Fort Erie needs jobs, and we have to fix this. And by the way, for anybody that might be a wanton environmentalist out there, do I look like an environmental terrorist? I mean, I come from Sault Ste. Marie. That's all we know is the environment. I got awards for protecting the environment, all right? The problem that we have is that the political will is, they're concerned that some of these rampant eco people will just say, look, trying to help Fort Erie is the thin edge of the wedge, and this government is just opening the door to completely throw everything out. Next thing, Japan's going to attack us because of the Kyoto Accord, and we'll be at war with Japan again. This is what you're trying to cause. So they get sensational, and they put a lot of baloney in the press. Just because it's in the press doesn't mean it's true. Sorry, guys. Not always.
Jim, do you want to explain PSW quickly?
Oh, okay. Can you hold that for me? Okay. PSW, Provincially Significant Wetland. It's a designation that says if you score a certain number of points, then, and you hit 860, I think it is, then you're a PSW and you're constrained. There's a lot of problems about that because it also means that if there's anything that even remotely looks like the PSW within 75 meters, that's also it. So for instance, there's PSWs at Fleet that extend across the highway, not because they're really wetlands, but because if you hop, skip, and jump every little puddle for 75 meters, you get there, right? They don't take responsibility for the fact that those puddles are there because when the province put the QEW through Fort Erie, that's the height to land. Everybody knows that. You stand on the QEW at, I think, Baker Road, and you're as high as you can possibly get in Fort Erie, right? So this is what it did. The QEW, on the benefit and behalf of all of Ontario, it separated the drainage pattern in Fort Erie from its traditional way into, on the north side it goes into the river, and on the south side it goes into the lake. It doesn't follow natural drainage patterns. So this is what's created some of the wetlands. So when you look at the word provincially significant wetland, you assume that they know what they're talking about. You assume that because of the government they're serious, and the word significant is significant. That significant means like my significant other. You know, this is most important person in my life, my significant other. Now, this is the definition of significant. Piece of paper, and that's a significant blot. If you were paying $10 for that paper, you would be going forward and saying, I want to have a discount on this piece of paper. I can live with that thought, but it's really significant. You know, I should pay $2 for this paper, not 10. Okay? So that's what significant means in this case. Okay, thank you. The other thing that's a complete travesty is that, you want the analogy about the Sioux too? All right. I didn't get any troubles doing the presentation. I got in trouble with the questions and answers. trying to address the people that were asking those questions.
Jim,
So,
just before you go too far, tell them how they designated Pacific Wetlands.
oh,
From an airplane.
well, from satellite.
Satellite and airplane.
Yeah, it was a test. Typically, the government tells you, because the government's budget is April 1st through to March 31st instead of January 1st to December 31st like ours. So that's a fiscal budget. Usually what happens is they want to spend money in January. It's just the way people are built, muscle memory, right? And so they build up and they get all their projects ready. And when the government launches the budget, April 1st or so, they start spending money. Well, the people in finance, they look at this and they see like 80% of the money going out really fast. And so they say, whoa, come around October, they say, better slow down, because if we spend at this same rate, we're going to be broke. We're going to be broke by the time we hit Christmas. It's only been this way for 125 years. They still don't get it, and they still fall for this, okay? So then what happens is after Christmas, we get into January, and then typically they go, wait a minute, we put the brakes on too fast, and we got too much money. If we don't spend the money, we're not going to get it next year. So we really have to find some projects and spend it. I know, because I've been in that position. I've been called, I can tell you that in the Ministry of Northern Development for Northern Ontario, I've been called in and said, listen, we got 5 hours to come up with a way to spend $20 million. Okay? And this is not just once, this is every year. And so what I would have communities with projects that were ready to go and could meet those conditions. And we tell them, look, there's no funding there right now, but just wait until February, be ready. And our communities were very happy with the way we progressed and saw the future. But what happens here is they turned around and did that with the Ministry of Natural Resources. They got about $20,000. They had somebody in the back room to check the wetlands. And so she looked at satellite data. Didn't have enough money to go out in the field and things, looked at satellite data. So for instance, we ran into some huge controversies. At the time this happened, about 6 years ago, we were, under other legislation, responsible to take on a mess called eagle castings. And the town had to take that responsibility on. And they gave it to us to go out and find somebody that would come in. So we analyzed it, and it came down to the fact that there was contaminants on the land. But this contaminant was fairly simple. It was just used foundry sand. It would cost about $375,000 to pack it up and send it to the dump, because that's what you do with it. This is not like PCBs or something, it's just used foundry sand. So what we did was we went out and found a company that would clean it up, and we would give them that in lieu of the cost of the land, and then they would put businesses on there, and we've got a great company there right now called Peninsula Alloy. It's been producing ever since. It's got 50, 60 jobs, and away we go. Roger Heisey started that, ships around the world. It's wonderful. But in the meantime, this 10,000 cubic meters of foundry sand was in the backyard. And it's in the backyard of Eagle Castings, now Peninsula Alloy. And sand is heavy, and you know that once it packs down with snow and that, next thing you know, there's some puddles and a couple cattails and a frog or two. So one ministry is telling us we have to clean it up for $375,000, and the other ministry says if we do, they'll take the EDC and the town to court. Can't touch it. So will you make up your mind? You know? What? We're going after tiger property next? This is ridiculous. So they made a lot of mistakes, and they've taken a lot of land that people have in their possession and laid waste to it. And I'll tell you what's a real travesty, full council. The government refuses to tell you this, right? It's a fact, it's a law, we have it mapped out, we know what properties are subject to PSWs. You can't develop on it. You can't develop within 30 meters of a wetland, and you can't touch anything, and so that wetland is going to continue to grow. The ministry calls it a live wetland. It's always going to get bigger, and you're going to have less of it. Well, the analogy I made was that up in northern Ontario, where I came from, I can go out and pretty much pee on any tree I want. And the analogy of that is that because it's all crown land, right? In southern Ontario, in Niagara, we can't do that because somebody owns that tree. Almost everything is fenced, everything is not crown land, it belongs to somebody. And when you dig down and ask that second question, you ask, why is this land belong to somebody? Well, it's because somebody bought the land 50 years ago, and they always kept it as a nest egg. Somebody bought it so that if anything happened to them, the price of land was always going up, and it'll take care of my wife, okay, who's now 60s or 70s or whatever. And it turns out that the land is worthless, and you're still paying taxes on it. And so people's value has been stripped. People invest in land. There's a lot of people by tradition invest in land here, and they do not know yet that their land is not going to be the next Walmart, it's not going to be the next industry, and they can't do anything with it. This is a real crying shame. And we've been trying to tell people from the EDC, but the agency responsible is the government of Ontario. They won't do it. They tell the municipality, you should do it. And the municipality says, why should we be the bearer of bad news? You get out there and tell them. But the point is, we've been trying to tell you what's happening. And I guess we are the eco-terrorists as a consequence. But there is real value lost here. And it's a travesty. Not only that, but by keeping our development within the urban service boundary, and by declaring the vast majority of it that is free PSWs, we have no room to develop cost-effective industrial land.
Okay, we're going to call it to close there. I want a big round of applause for Mayor Martin and Jim Thibert. Thank you very much. Thanks again to everybody. I realize you're busy, so it might be a few minutes late, but we're almost on time. So thanks for coming out. Thanks to the Bridgewater and for your participation. Have a great day.